so you and I are among the more mature staff members.
Yeah.
In parse that however you will.
Sounds old to me.
And so we grew up in a day where root canals were a much bigger deal than they are now.
Yeah.
And these days they've really got it down. I've had a few root canals myself over the years, and I was amazed when I had my first one. It's like, wow, that wasn't bad at all. So all of the less mature staff grew up in a world where root canals are no big deal, and that could explain the lack of sympathy.
Yeah, because I can remember
or
old
it could
people.
be something connected with your personality. I don't know.
Maybe they just don't like me. I don't know. But I do remember those, in the olden days when we were young, it would be like almost in hushed tones. Oh, he needs a root canal. Like, oh, what is that? That sounds horrible. 888-318-7884, the number, couple lines open. As I said, Jimmy Akin, our guest. As you probably know, Jimmy Akin is the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, a growing corner of the internet where lots and lots of people have really found the pleasure of thinking through hard mysteries with clues sometimes more than clues. Jimmy reasons out whether they're mysteries of the faith or just mysteries that you find in the natural world. Or maybe somebody robbed a plane and jumped out of the back of it and nobody ever found him. Jimmy
Cooper.
Yeah, D.B. Cooper. What's tomorrow on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
Tomorrow we're looking at Our Lady of Kibeho and the Rwandan genocide. Our Lady of Kibeho was an apparition of Mary in Rwanda in Africa back in the 1980s. And the revelations predicted a coming genocide, which then happened. And so we're going to be looking at that, as well as the evidence that the church used in evaluating the apparitions. And Our Lady of Kibeho is the only approved African apparition. But when the bishop released his document, which we'll be quoting from extensively, he not only approved the visions of the core visionaries, but he warned that there were also false visionaries that people needed to be wary of. And so we're going to be telling you about the false visionaries as well.
People kind of piggybacked on that?
Exactly.
Yeah. 888-318-7884, our number. Let's go to George in Florida, watching on YouTube. George, thanks for starting us off today. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, Jimmy. Well, my question today is regarding John the Baptist and Jesus. Did they know each other as children, or is the first time they met when John the Baptist baptized Christ?
Well, we can't say for 100% because Scripture doesn't tell us. It doesn't record any interactions between Jesus and John the Baptist as children. Having said that, though, I think that the odds are very much in favor of them actually knowing each other as children. I would put the odds above 95%. The reason I say that is because even though now I should clear away something that that sometimes people wonder about. There is a verse in the Gospels that talks about John the Baptist being in the wilderness until the day he was manifested to Israel and began his ministry. That does not mean that as soon as he was born, his parents ditched a little baby out in the wilderness and let him grow up being raised by wolves or something. They were far too responsible as parents to do that to him. And so John the Baptist was raised by his parents just like other children would be. And then at some point prior to his public ministry, when he was probably in his mid-20s, although it could have been in his teenage years, he then began living as a desert hermit. And that's what that verse means. So if we understand that verse properly, it means he would have been around his parents' house growing up. And even though his parents lived in the hill country of Judea and the Holy Family lived up in Nazareth, that didn't mean that they wouldn't meet. Because one of the things that happened 3 times every year was there was a pilgrimage festival where if you were an observant Jew, you were expected to go to Jerusalem to worship. And Passover is one of those, but there were two others, and we know that the Holy Family observed those feasts because we see them doing that in Luke chapter 2 when Jesus is 12 years old and is found at the temple. And so when they would go down to Jerusalem for these feasts, it would be natural to get together with relatives, and especially given that John the Baptist had a miraculous birth and Jesus had an even more miraculous birth, and they were relatives in the same extended family, it would be extraordinarily surprising if the families never got together and never let the two miraculous children play and relate and things like that. So I would say, even though we're not told, that the odds are overwhelmingly high that they did know each other as children.
Okay, George?
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for that answer.
All right. Thank you very much, George. The number is 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, our guest. And up next, Thomas in Austin, Texas, listening on the Alexa. Thomas, thank you very much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, yes. My question is about those autonomous sensory meridian response, or ASMR videos, and I was just wondering, some of them describe them as like hypnosis, like it said, it'll say the title will be like ASMR sleep hypnosis, and some of them like they're giving suggestions, like telling you to be relaxed, or even or just tapping noises or whispering. And I'm just wondering, I understand that hypnosis is a distinct phenomena from ASMR, but I'm just wondering, for therapeutic reasons, is it okay for a Catholic to like make use of this either with or without the hypnosis piece?
Well, let's deal with hypnosis first, because the Church actually has something to say about that. When Anton Mesmer first introduced mesmerism, or what later came to be known as hypnosis, it had a kind of occult reputation. And because people didn't understand how it worked, and so, anytime anybody has something that seems to work, but they don't know how it works, people always want to say, oh, it's got to be demons, because it's always demons in people's mind. But the Church actually looked at this, and they said, and in some time ago, I forget if it may have been as early as the mid-1800s, but I'd have to check. The Holy See did a look at hypnosis. Actually, now I'm thinking it was the mid-1900s, but the Holy See did a look at hypnosis, and they said, look, as long as you're not doing anything occult with it, as long as you're not trying to contact spirits or things like that, as long as you're using it for purely therapeutic purposes, you can do that. And I talk about that. I think it's episode 55 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which I did on hypnosis. We actually quote from the papal document that discusses it. Now, the fact that it's not an occult practice in and of itself doesn't mean that it works, or doesn't tell you a whole lot about how it works. And there's a debate about exactly what does hypnosis do and exactly how effective it is. And personally, I'm not persuaded by some of the stronger claims about hypnosis. And now we have ASMR, which, for people who may not be familiar with it, is the use of certain sounds or noises, and oftentimes there are things like people whispering, or making noises with their mouths and stuff like that, and it's supposed to affect us on a nervous system level, and there can be attempts to use it as some kind of therapy. Well, the thing is that ASMR is so new that I'm not aware of scientific studies on its effectiveness as a therapy for anything. There may have been such studies, and there may be such studies underway now. I'm just not aware of them. What I would say is, as long as you're not coupling it with like calling on spirits or something like that, as long as you're just using it as a form of audio stimulation for your nervous system to help you sleep or whatever it may be, then it would be essentially morally the same as hypnosis. And if it has therapeutic benefit for you, then it would be okay to use it, even if it's just the placebo effect that's doing that. Just don't connect it up to a bunch of witchcraft or anything like that. Just treat it as a natural therapy and see if it works for you.
Okay, Thomas?
Okay, that sounds good. I mean, there is some uncertainty as to whether, like, what the person will suggest that you do. Like, most of the time they're just telling you to relax or whatever, but is there any danger that they could tell you to do something and then bad or something?
Well, sure, but then someone could always tell you to do something bad. I mean, I could tell you to do something bad right now. I'm not going to because I'm a good guy, but just in ordinary conversation, people can tell you to do bad stuff. And even in hypnosis, it has been acknowledged that you can't really get a person to do anything that's opposed to their moral beliefs. And so I wouldn't worry about it. Personally, I would be skeptical of how much effect does ASMR have to begin with, and I wouldn't be paranoid. If something says it's going to tell you to relax, take it at its word, and if there are problems, you can always course correct later.
Thanks, Thomas. We got to take our first break. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. You are welcome to call with your question. Did you know that investing just 5 minutes out of your day can make a difference in someone else's eternal life? Jimmy Akin's A Daily Defense.
Okay, let's stop right there.
Yeah.
They always say 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
It is in this promotional literature. It is not 5 minutes a day.
How does it?
That is more than what it actually is. And I know that because I've been reading these things for an audiobook version of it.
Oh, so you've timed them.
Yeah, and it's like 3 minutes a day. So
there will be a meeting.
Don't make it sound like it's more than it is. It's just 3 minutes a day.
All right, here I go.
On average.
Watch this. Did you know that investing just 3 minutes a day can make a difference in someone else's eternal life? Jimmy Akin's A Daily Defense is the perfect apologetics book for the person on the go. Hey, we all have 3 minutes to spare. And if you enter promo code 2022DD at checkout, you'll save 35%. Visit shop.catholic.com and order your copy of A Daily Defense.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
This is Dr. Ray Guarendi from The Doctor Is In. You call in and we will talk about what matters to you in your life. We can put our heads together to help you solve the problems of life and to use your faith to get even smarter.
The Doctor Is In with Dr. Ray Guarendi. Tomorrow afternoon, 1 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Jimmy Akin. This hour, next hour, Mark Brumley will be here, president of Ignatius Press, and it's all open forum, open to anyone, whether you're Christian or not, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're a religious person or not. You can call with your question. Maybe you have a moral question about the Bible, a question about the person of Jesus, anything else. 888-318-7884. Going to Hayden, Idaho now. Emma in Hayden, Idaho, listening on the EWTN app. Glad to have you, Emma. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you. Okay, so I told my kids about at Christmas time when they were all here that I entering the Catholic Church.
Wait, hang on a minute. We talked about this before, that you were going to do this. I remember this. Yeah.
Yes.
So we talked to you a couple times in the early part of winter.
Yes.
Okay,
and
great.
It did not go over well.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. I refused to engage, and my husband... Go ahead.
So if you told your kids that you were becoming Catholic, what religious perspective do they come from?
Evangelical Christian.
Okay. Just wanted to understand the situation. You were saying?
I refused to engage, and my husband finally put a stop to it. Said, knock it off. And they all did. And we had a great Christmas. We really did.
Uh-huh.
But I'm at the point now. I go to my old church with my husband every other week. I go to the Catholic church at 8 when I go to his church at 10. But I need to start telling people at church, and I don't want an argument, and I just have a sick feeling in my stomach about the whole thing.
Okay, so I guess there are a number of ways of approaching this. I mean, one approach would be to just not tell people, and they can, if it comes up later, you can always explain it then. I mean, as long as you're still going to this church to be with your husband, they'll still see you at church, and there's not it doesn't seem to be an urgent necessity that you need to tell these people. And sometimes it can be helpful in avoiding confrontation to simply make the change and become Catholic and let people find out organically rather than having a big tell everybody tour. And so, that's one way of approaching it. If you do want to tell people about it, well, you might want to tell just a few people that you know well and that you are friends with at the church. You maybe don't want to do it while you're attending the church, because it's kind of an awkward situation if we're all out here in public and suddenly someone says, I'm becoming Catholic. It might be easier if you either got together with them personally or talked to them over the phone or sent them an email and just said, look, I wanted to let you know about this because this is a very important thing to me, and you're someone who I care about and I respect, and I want you to know about this. I'm not looking for an argument or anything, but I want to assure you that my love for Christ is as great as it has ever been. He is my Lord and Savior, and I view this as a completion or fulfillment of my Christian faith. I feel I'm growing even closer to God, and so I want you to know that I'll always be your friend, and I'll be praying for you, and please pray for me as well.
Emma, I'll leave it there because the lines are full, but I hope that was helpful to you, and you're certainly welcome to call anytime. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I'll go to Anthony now in Denver, Colorado, listening on Catholic.com. Anthony, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
I have a philosophical question. Does the church have a preferred, perspective on the individual, the thing that individuates us, whether it's material or the soul? And if so, if it's the material, from what I understand, how do we understand remaining ourselves after death, but before the resurrection of the body?
Okay, so throughout the centuries, Catholic theologians and philosophers have devoted a lot of attention to this question, and there is not a single point of view that has emerged. There are a number of different possibilities. One of the things that is generally agreed is that our soul is the main thing that makes us who we are. And so the matter in our bodies can change over the course of time. Obviously, originally, we were all just a single cell, and we didn't have all of the matter in our body then that we do now. That matter has come into us over the course of time as we've eaten food and breathed and drank liquids and so forth, and we pick up matter from all those sources. And then some of that matter passes out of us, and even our cells themselves die over a period of time in a process called apoptosis. The cell will naturally be programmed to die to make way for other younger, healthier cells, and new cells get formed, and the debris of old cells gets flushed out. And so you'll sometimes hear, and I don't really believe this is true, but you'll hear claims like all of the atoms in your body change over every 7 years. And I'm quite sure that's not true, because like some of the atoms in your bone and your teeth and things are going to be there way longer than 7 years. But there is no constant matter that has to be in our bodies for us to be us. The real center of our individual personality is, I don't mean that in the psychological sense, but our personhood is our soul. And so as a result, when our body dies, it's separated from our soul and it can begin to fall apart. But our soul, which we've had all the way through life, we don't get a new soul every so often. Our soul continues to remain, and because it's not made of matter, it doesn't fall apart. And as a result, it's immortal, and so it survives until one day God will resurrect us. Now, there have been technical differences between philosophers, Catholic philosophers, about how all this works. For example, St. John Duns Scotus, or John Duns Scotus, is famous for having proposed that even within our spirit, there's something called a hexaity that makes us this thing, this spirit, rather than some other spirit, that there's a quality that he referred to as a hexaity. Other Catholic philosophers like Thomas Aquinas didn't use that concept, so there is a kind of discussion about it, but it is generally agreed that the thing that makes us us is primarily our spirit, and so it continues to exist until the resurrection.
Then I'm going to leave it there. Thanks very much, Anthony, for the call. I hope that was helpful to you. Again, lines are full, so I'm going to try to keep moving on these calls. James, I think this might be our friend James in the Philippines, in Manila, Philippines, watching on Twitch. James, thank you for the call. Are you there with us?
It is your friend from the Philippines. Hey, Sai. Hey, Jimmy. Greetings from Friday morning again.
Yeah, I didn't say anything because I knew you were. I don't want to steal your line. I stole it last time. But how's the future going?
Very well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, all right. Friday morning in the Philippines. You've had your breakfast. Go ahead and ask your question of Jimmy Akin.
Yeah. So, Jimmy, should swearing on the Bible in courtrooms or during trials be made optional for non-believers? You know, I actually asked someone about this, and I got the usual reply that, even though they're atheists or non-believers, God will affect them, the Word of God will affect them in mysterious ways. But I want to know your opinion on this.
Well, so in some countries like the United States, it is optional whether you swear on a Bible, because there are people here in the United States that, aren't Christians and don't recognize the authority of the Bible and may even have problems with the Christian faith to where they would feel it's a violation of their conscience to swear on a Bible when they don't recognize the Bible as a holy book, and they could feel like they're being forced to do something against their conscience. And so there are provisions here in the United States for people to make an alternative oath, just where they promise that they're going to tell the truth. I don't see a problem with that. I wouldn't view Bibles superstitiously as if this is somehow, if someone who is not a believer swears on a Bible, that's somehow going to make him tell the truth more than if he didn't swear on a Bible, than if he made some alternative kind of oath. So I would be inclined to let people do whatever form of promise to tell the truth that they are most comfortable with, because and that's consistent with their belief. Because if you force them to do something that they are resenting, that could affect their testimony. If a court forces a person who doesn't believe in the Bible and who doesn't want to swear on it to go ahead and swear on it anyway, that may make the person mad, and he may say, well, I don't respect the court for what they did to me, so this court doesn't deserve truthful testimony from me, and I'm going to say whatever I please. So I think it is good to have people make the most solemn form of promise that they're capable of making given their beliefs before they testify, but I wouldn't require specifically swearing on the Bible from people who don't believe in the Bible.
James, there's the music, so I got to let you go. Thanks very much. It's always nice to get a call from the Philippines, and especially get a call from you. Looking forward to Friday morning so I can find out what you already know, what it's like. Right back with more Jimmy Akin.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Tried to get the whole studio dancing on that, and I got exactly zero response. What's up with you people? Come on, it's Thursday.
It's your dance, Cy. It's the Cy Tusi.
Yeah, doing the Cy Tusi. Thanks for playing that, Sarah. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's open forum. About 1 million people on. Let me count. Yeah, just about 1 million people on the line. So, going to keep moving. Blake in Nebraska, watching on YouTube. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, I am a Protestant Christian, and I am in a philosophy class right now. And one of the things we've been discussing is if God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good, why is there evil? Because if he was truly all-good, he would eliminate all evil at all possibility. And if he was all good, he would do that. And if he's all-knowing and all-powerful, he would be able to. And my response would probably be, well, because of free will. Because of free will, we need free will to be able to love, and because we have the choice to love, we also have the choice to choose evil. And then the other response, or other possibility, is that God would just make us all robots. But she brought forth a third possibility, that God creates us with free will, but without the possibility of committing sin. And I wouldn't think that's a possibility until like the thought of Mary came up and the fact that she was sinless. So if God was able to make all of us like Mary, why wouldn't he make all of us like Mary?
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Well, this is one of the mysterious aspects of the problem of evil. We can recognize that that there are partial solutions to the problem of evil. There are aspects of it that that we can clarify, but in this life, we don't, from a Catholic perspective, have the full answer to the problem of evil. The Catechism talks about how we'll understand it better. The Catholic Catechism talks about how we'll understand it better in the next life than we do now. But for right now, we have some partial answers, but we don't have a comprehensive one. And part of the reason that, or one of the partial answers that we have, does involve free will. That God wants us to freely choose to love him. And if we didn't, then, we could be simply robots who were programmed to act a certain way, but we haven't freely chosen to love God. Now, at some point, and this is something that we share as Christians, both Protestants and Catholics, we acknowledge that in the resurrection, we will be perfect. We will not be sinners then. And so I would say we will still have free will, but it will be freedom to choose among different goods rather than the freedom to choose either a good or an evil. So it will be a different kind of free will than we have right now. And we know that that kind of free will, where you can choose among goods but not an evil, we know that's possible because Jesus has that. Jesus can choose all kinds of goods, but as the infinitely holy Son of God, Jesus can't choose evil. And so that shows us this form of free will is possible. Now, it's actually not Catholic teaching that Mary has this particular form of free will. The particular, what the Church actually teaches is that she, in fact, never sinned. But it doesn't teach that she was unable to sin. That's a gift called impeccability. And it is a common theological opinion in Catholic circles that God did give Mary impeccability, but it's not actually church teaching. He could have created her like he created Adam and Eve, with the freedom to choose among goods and evils, and without the disordered desires that we have as a result of original sin. And it could simply be that Mary chose never to sin, even though she could have. That's one possibility. So it might be that that God gave Mary the same kind of freedom that he gave Eve, in which case her will is similar to ours in that she's able to choose either good or evil, but she just didn't have the disordered desires that we do. On the other hand, it is possible, from a Catholic point of view, that he gave her impeccability, just like he's going to give all of us impeccability if we stay faithful to Christ. Part of the answer for why he would give that to her but not the rest of us is to make her a more fitting mother for his son. He wanted to give her a unique form of holiness, both to make her a more fitting mother for Jesus and also to serve as a sign of what God will one day do for all of us, because one day we will all be rendered immaculate and impeccable. The question would then be, well, why didn't God do that for the rest of us? And that answer is, I think, where we run out of, we reach the limit of what our current answers are able to clarify about the mystery of evil, because God could eliminate evil. He could fast forward the universe immediately to its final state with no suffering and no sin and no anything like that going on. Why doesn't he? Well, we know he's bringing good out of this somehow, but it becomes, that's Catholic teaching. God would not permit an evil if he wasn't going to bring good out of it. But exactly what good he gets by letting the rest of us have this kind of journey towards perfection is something that philosophers can propose ideas about, but that I don't think we have a definitive answer for yet.
Okay, Blake?
Does that help, Blake?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Call again. Nice talking with you. Oklahoma. Let's go to Renee in Oklahoma, listening on the EWTN app. Glad to have you, Renee. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. I would like for you to please repeat your cosmic prayer so I can copy it down.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll say it for you, and then you can go back and either look at the video or the audio of the podcast afterwards. You can go to youtube.com/CatholicCom to find the video after the show is over. But the cosmic prayer goes like this. Lord, thank you for all the graces in our lives, the natural and especially the supernatural. And then I will say, please help, and I may mention particular people that I know need help. And then I will say, and all those who are praying or who have asked for prayer or who would want prayer or who would benefit from prayer across all times and worlds, especially as they make their ultimate decisions concerning you. And please be superlatively gentle with us in all things. Or please be superlatively gentle with all of us in all things.
Okay, Renee. So if you want to go back over it, we're available. The video and audio are available. The audio on our website, the video on YouTube and Facebook. Okay, Renee.
Yes, thank you very much.
Well,
Bye.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
We've got some great podcasts for you this week, so let me just tell you about them before we send you off to the break. We did an interview with Joe Heschmeyer on the definition of religion. Joe has a course on the world religions in our Catholic Answers School of Apologetic. So we just said to him, Joe, what's the definition of religion? And who gets to say what religion is? And also kind of we followed that up with why do world religions classes sometimes tend to undermine Christian faith? And he talked about all that with us. That's at CatholicAnswersFocus.com, CatholicAnswersFocus.com. And Trent's got a couple of great ones on his podcast, The Overpopulation Boogeyman. This is a return. He covers it again, how the prophets of doom in the late 1970s got the issue of overpopulation wrong, even though they assured us that mathematics and science made it impossible that this was not true. It turned out not to be true. And then he's got an episode on in vitro fertilization, again, making the case against in vitro fertilization, which often surprises people that we Catholics have a case to make against in vitro fertilization because we really like babies. So it's worth listening to. You can go to TrentHornPodcast.com for that one, TrentHornPodcast.com.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
This is Conversations with Consequences, where we delve deeper into issues affecting our church, our country, and our core, the family.
As Catholics, we need to be informed, aware, and able to talk through some of the tough topics that we're facing in our culture and in our world. Conversations with Consequences gives us the tools to do so.
It's not enough to pray. We have to be a light for the world.
Conversations with Consequences, this Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour. Next hour, Mark Brumley. And we'll continue with open forum next hour. So if we're not able to get to your call by the top of this hour, just hang on and we'll get to it with Mark in the next hour. Next one comes from John in New York, who's listening to EWTN on channel 130 Sirius XM satellite radio. But John's driving, so he asked if we could just read his question. He could listen to the answer while he's driving. Okay, John, here we go. John asks, you were discussing hypnosis. In line with that, is yoga a religion?
Yoga is not a religion. It originated as a religious practice, though, in Hinduism. And so it's kind of like the rosary is not a religion, but the rosary is a religious practice in Christianity. And in the same way, yoga is not a religion, but it is a religious practice in Hinduism, and that's how it got started. There's not just one kind of yoga. There are a bunch of different kinds of yoga. And like hypnosis, if you disentangle it from the non-Christian religious elements so that it becomes just a set of stretching exercises that you are continuing to call yoga for historical reasons, well, then it's no longer a religious practice. Then it's a bunch of stretching exercises. And we shouldn't be superstitious about, some non-Christians invented these stretching exercises, so they're forever tainted. Well, that's superstition. That's not church teaching. In fact, the church does not have a teaching on yoga. What it does teach is that Christians should use Christian religious practices. So if you're doing a religious practice, it should be a Christian one. On the other hand, if you're doing a set of stretching exercises, well, as long as it's not being used religiously, then it's just a set of stretching exercises and it's no big deal. Having said that, if you go to various yoga studios here in the United States or work with individual yoga teachers, they may try to introduce religious elements that are non-Christian into the practice of yoga in their class, and you need to be on your guard for that. So it's not like you can do this uncritically, but in principle, if you've just got a set of stretching exercises that you're calling yoga, there's nothing wrong with stretching exercises.
John, safe travels across New York. Thanks for the call and for the question. We go now to Jake in Ohio, listening also on EWTN, channel 130, on Sirius XM satellite radio. Jake, go ahead.
Afternoon, evening, fellas.
Good evening.
Simple question, but probably though a long answer, maybe. Difference between soul and spirit. Thank you.
Okay, so the difficulty with this is that the terms for soul and spirit, both in Hebrew and in Greek, are not used consistently in Scripture. As a result, they're used in different ways in different passages. For example, if you look in Genesis chapter 2, in describing the creation of Adam, it says God made Adam's body from the dust of the ground, and then he breathed into his nostrils the spirit of life, and thus man became a living soul. And there it looks like the term soul is being used for the entire person, not just for a part of the person, but for Adam, body, and spirit put together. On the other hand, there are other passages in Scripture that use the word soul to refer to the immaterial part of us. And in the New Testament, there is a passage which talks about the Word of God being sharp enough to divide joints and marrow and soul and spirit. Now, joints and marrow are two different things. They're both parts of the body, but they're not different substances. They're both made out of matter. And so they're different what joints and marrow are different aspects of our bodies. And so when the passage then goes on to say, and soul and spirit, that's like even harder. Those would be even harder to divide, because you can see, if you took a knife or a sword, you could see how you could divide joints from marrow. But there's no obvious way to divide a soul from a spirit. And so this could be a case of hyperbole, where the biblical author is in order to convey the incisiveness, because this is all a metaphor, but in order to convey the incisiveness of God's word, it's like, it can even do this impossible thing, which no one could do, divide a soul from a spirit. On the other hand, you can use the term soul and the term spirit to refer to two different aspects of our immaterial nature. And some people have done that, and when they do that, they will sometimes, and they may define them different ways, but the term spirit will sometimes be used for the aspect of our immaterial nature that relates directly to God, whereas the soul is then, to distinguish it from the spirit, is the aspect of our immaterial nature that does not relate directly to God in the same way. That's one way people have used these terms, and there is no set definition. People can use these terms differently. What the church teaches, as I mentioned, they're used differently even in different passages of the Bible. So the Bible's not trying to use them in a precise way that's the same all the time. As a result, the terms can be used in different senses, but what the church does teach is that humans have a material nature, which is our bodies, and an immaterial nature, which is often called either the soul or the spirit, but we're not like made of three things. Body, soul, and spirit are not three different things. There's really just two things in human nature, one of which is material and the other of which is immaterial, and you can call it what you want.
Thanks, Jake. I'm going to keep moving, try to get as many on as we can before we have to go. Let's go to Julian in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Julian, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, so my question is Joe Hochmeyer, he wrote this book, The Early Church Was a Catholic Church?
Yes.
And so I study ancient religions, especially during the Dark Ages. And I see the church doing some crazy stuff. They will burn people alive because of the belief system. They would even burn their own people, like John Huss and Wrigley and Latimer and all these guys. Is that the same church that you consider to be the early church as the Catholic Church?
Well, Julian, I will answer your question. First, though, the vocabulary that you're using suggests that you have not been reading the most accurate scholarly literature, because the term that you used, Dark Ages, was a term that was invented after the Protestant Reformation as a pejorative term, as a way of insulting people who were living during what most scholars would call the Middle Ages. And so if you read scholarly histories today, they're going to be using the terminology Middle Ages because they're trying to approach things from an objective, neutral point of view and just be accurate about the facts. If you encounter authors who are using the term Dark Ages, that indicates they have some kind of axe to grind, that they're not being fair and objective, because the Middle Ages were not dark. In fact, they were a time of increased learning and flourishing, and there was a lot of intellectual activity, both in terms of secular knowledge and in terms of religious discussions, and it was a really fruitful period. I mean, we had giants of intellect like St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure and John Duns Scotus and St. Augustine and all of these people who were not dimwits. They didn't have dark intellects. They were brilliant people. And so it sounds to me like you've been reading some folks who have an axe to grind and are going to be giving you a distorted presentation of what happened in these centuries. So I would encourage you to read more broadly. You could of course read books that are written about this period from a Catholic perspective, so you hear both sides of the story. You might want to check out, for example, books by Steve Weidenkopf, who we've published some from here at Catholic.com. Also Warren Carroll, another historian, and they're going to give you the Catholic side of the story, so you're not just listening to one side. On the other hand, you can also read works by secular historians about the Middle Ages. Now, having said that, Jesus founded, if you look in Matthew 16, he says, I'm going to found my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. What it says in Greek is the gates of Hades. Hades was the place of the dead. And so by saying the gates of the place of the dead will never prevail against his church, Jesus is saying his church is never going to pass out of existence. And so he founded it in the first century, and it continues on through today. And thus it continued through the Middle Ages. It was the same church. Now, the church officials are still sinners. I mean, you can look right back to the very first pope, St. Peter. He was a sinner. He did things he shouldn't. He denied Christ 3 times, and yet that didn't stop God working through him. And in fact, the Holy Spirit later, after he denied Christ, the Holy Spirit went on to inspire him to write 2 of the books of the New Testament. So even if you're a sinner, you can still be a vehicle of God's grace and a leader in God's church. Well, all subsequent leaders of the church and members of the church have been sinners. And at times they've done things that they very much should have not. I won't get into some of the details here because we're running short on time. But yeah, it's the same church in the Middle Ages as was there in the first century and as is here today. And the fact that it's a church made up of sinners who do bad things sometimes, just like members of every group, whether it's Christian or not, every group has people that do bad things, but by God's grace, the church is able to serve as an instrument of God's grace despite the flaws of its members.
Julian, I'm going to say thanks and move because we do want to get as many on as we can. All the lines have stayed full for the entire hour. Hey, if you're on the line, don't go anywhere. Mark Brumley will be here to answer questions shortly. Jimmy Akin, our guest right now, and coming back here to California. Ryan in California, watching on YouTube. You are next. You're going to have to be quick, though, if you want an answer, Ryan. Hi, Ryan.
I just had a quick question. Hello. I was just wondering if, since we'll be reunited with our bodies one day, does this mean we'll be able to do earthly activities in heaven, such as like playing football or something like that?
Well, we don't know about specific activities, but the way that the book of Revelation depicts the final state of humanity is not in heaven up in the clouds, but living actually on the new earth. So God's going to renovate the current earth. It will be upgraded, and we will be living on that new earth. And so we will be participating in earthly things in our raised earthly bodies. What specifically those things will be, like playing football or something else, is something that I don't think we can really know in this life. But if God gives you something, he means you to use it. And so when God gives us our physical bodies back, he means for us to use them, and we will be on the new earth and able to use them. So yes, there will be earthly activities.
I hope there'll be lots of room for activities on the new earth. Ryan, does that satisfy you?
It does. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Jimmy Akin has been our guest this hour. I want to talk again about Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World because we just got a few seconds with you, Jimmy. Tomorrow, the second episode on Our Lady of Kibeho, which until you did these episodes, I did not realize 2 things. One, that this was the only approved Marian apparition in Africa, and 2, just how prescient how much the prophecies proved out from that apparition.
Yeah, it's a really dramatic story. So people can get ready tonight if they want by listening to the first episode if they haven't, or they can wait until tomorrow and listen to both episodes together. But it's a very dramatic story, and we've got some voice work done with, we have a teenage girl in particular reading the voices of some of the visionaries, and wow, is it powerful.
Oh, wonderful. That's Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Just type it into your machine. Your machine will find it. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Jimmy, thanks. When do we see you? Are we seeing you tomorrow?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay, I'm a week. I got out of time because I did the ads.
Like Billy Pilgrim.
Yeah, and so next Friday, we'll do Bible Questions with Jimmy Akin. Coming up, Mark Brumley, president of Ignatius Press, one of the most impressive publishing houses in the Alpha Quadrant. Right back after this. Whoa, look, one line open. If you want to call, 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Radio stations across the country, across the world, even on satellite radio. So I assume that all over the Alpha Quadrant they are hearing this broadcast. And that's good because Mark Brumley is president of Ignatius Press, the most important publisher in the Alpha Quadrant. Mark Brumley, thanks for being with us.
Hey, I'm happy to be with you. While I will not take credit for Ignatius Press being the most important publishing company in the Alpha Quadrant, Father Fessio founded it, and lots of other people are responsible for its awesomeness. Let's all acknowledge that there are other awesome publishing companies in the Alpha Quadrant, not least of which is Catholic Answers Publishing.
Well, aren't you nice? That's a very nice thing to say. And you carry a whole bunch of our books.
Yeah, so we're on the it's all the Alpha Quadrant Catholic publishing team.
That's right.
Together.
That's right. We're all in this together. I feel like I'm going to break out singing right now.
So can I mention something which I feel only slightly awkward in pushing this, but I do want to mention a book that we came out with last season because it is an awesome book and
why
it
would you
fits
feel
really well.
awkward about that? I'm curious. What book is it?
Well, it's a book called Wisdom and Wonder, and its subtitle is How Peter Kreeft Shaped the Next Generation of Catholics, and it's edited by Brandon Vaught of Word on Fire fame.
Yeah,
and it's a wonderful little book about. It's written by a number of people, number of contributors. I won't read them all, but Brandon Vaught's the editor and a contributor and all of that. And, Catholic Answers' own Trent Horn contributed an essay called Peter Kreeft and Pro-Life Persuasion. And some of your authors and our other authors and our mutual authors even, have contributed things on how Peter Kreeft really made a difference to their faith, including a lot of converts. So I'm going to hold this up for the people that can see it. And it's got a picture of Peter Kreeft on the cover. And again, it's called Wisdom and Wonder, How Peter Kreeft Shaped the Next Generation of Catholics. And Peter did not know we were doing this book. And he found out about it. He was at first not really pleased or enthused.
He wasn't?
He was not. But, I think he felt honored. But he doesn't, he's a kind of humble guy. And so some of us had to say, no, we're doing it. Tough luck, pal.
Yeah.
Too bad. Because you have to have the humility to accept the fact that God has used you as an instrument in so many people's lives.
Right.
And so we publish. We're not the only publisher of Peter Kreeft, but probably principal publisher.
Right.
But he's got a lot of other publishers out there. So in talking about the Alpha Quadrant, Catholic League of publishers. There are a lot of other publishers that publish Kreeft, but somebody we all have in common, or most of us have in common, is Peter Kreeft, and he's such a blessing as a philosopher, as an apologist.
Right.
And he would deny being a theologian, but he is a theologian, not by training, but by his actual study and what he does. And he's just a great gift to the church. So I would encourage people to get Wisdom and Wonder, How Peter Kreeft Shaped the Next Generation of Catholics. Edited by Brandon Vaught and published by us at Ignatius Press.
Well, good for you and for Brandon. That's great that he did that. I remember when Peter Kreeft was out here and doing the show with us, and I asked him, "Do you realize what it means to people when you come around here?" And he goes, "No, I don't think I do. I just do my work. I just continue to do the work." And he was delightful and very humble, but what a towering figure in apologetics.
Yeah, I know, and he acknowledges that he's a philosopher and he approaches things philosophically. He doesn't like it when people try to suggest he's a great philosopher because he doesn't do a lot of original kind of scholarly philosophical work, and he's never wanted to do that. He's always wanted to make philosophy accessible to people and use philosophy in service of the faith. But he's still a great philosopher. Great philosophers is someone who gets you thinking about the great ideas and the great issues in life and how to live and why are we here and all of that. And while he hasn't written the definitive textbook on David Hume or some really obscure philosophical point, he writes tons and tons of books that get people thinking about God and the faith, tons of apologetics, and just basic good old-fashioned philosophy. So
it's like a Festschrift.
Yeah, it's kind of a Festschrift without the
fest.
And a lot of fest, without the highfalutin scholarly connotation that comes with that.
Very good, very good. Say the name of it just one more time, and then Ignatius.com is where you can go to get it. Just go to Ignatius, or anywhere where they have good Catholic books, I'm sure.
Right. And you guys might sell it too. You probably do. It's called Wisdom and Wonder. Subtitle, How Peter Kreeft Shaped the Next Generation of Catholics. And it's got lots of testimonies and how people came into the church and how their faith was sustained and particular arguments that helped them. And it's got a great little list of, in the appendices, How to Read Peter Kreeft by Brandon Vaught, different subject areas. You know, of course, we published this in the fall, and of course it's now out of date in that list because there's several Kreeft books that have come out since then. So
well, that's going to happen anytime. He's just going to, yeah.
We've got one coming out this season, next season, and that's just us, you know. So
very good. 888-318-7884 is our number. It's open forum. Mark Brumley is our guest, and let's head off to calls. Greg in Omaha, Nebraska, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Greg, thanks for the call. Go ahead with your question for Mark.
Hi, Mark. So my question is, my son came to me and said that his theology teacher at his Catholic high school told him that John the Evangelist and John the Apostle were not the same person. And I thought that I had heard somewhere, and I can't remember which person on Catholic radio told me or I heard it from, but that was an old theory and that they have found evidence that they are the same person. So just wanted to find out some resources that I could point my son, to steer him correctly, or myself if I'm incorrect, to correct myself. Okay,
very good question. First of all, you should know that the Gospel of John doesn't have an attribution that says this was written by John the Apostle, or this wasn't written by John the Apostle, it was written by John somebody else. We know who wrote it based on the earliest traditions of the church, and so those earliest traditions have John, the son of Zebedee, also called John the Apostle, as the author. Now, there are theories based upon some early references among the church fathers and other writings to another John, and there are theories that perhaps because John would have been a very old man at the time that the Gospel of John is thought to have been written, so generally thought to have been written in the 90s. So Jesus died and rose again around the year 30. And John is generally thought to have been the last gospel based on the earliest traditions. And so the thinking has been that it's probably written in the 90s. Some people think it was written around 70, maybe even before the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. But probably majority opinion is that it's written in the 90s. So John would have been very old. Not impossibly old, but very old. And so because he would have been very old, it is sometimes supposed that he didn't actually put pen to paper, as it were, or pen to parchment or pen to papyrus, but that he had assistance or help. And so indication of this is sometimes found if you look at the last chapter of the Gospel of John, John chapter 21, you will see that it is preceded in the immediate verse before it, or a couple verses before it, by what looks like a closing out. So John 20, verse 30 says, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." So some people think, well, that sounds like he's closing out. You go to chapter 21, it says, "After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias," and so on. And we get the account of Jesus talking to Peter and say, "Feed my sheep." and Peter's response. And then at the end of that chapter, Peter says, what's going to happen to this one, the beloved disciple, the person who is seen as the author or the source of the book? And Jesus says, none of your business, basically.
Yeah.
And then in verse 24 it says, this is the disciple who is bearing witness to these things, who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. So you notice it says it's the disciple who's written these things, who's bearing witness to these things, and then we know that his testimony is true. So that the theorizing is, well, there's John who's actually the bearing witness, and maybe he's written some of it. In fact, maybe he wrote 20 chapters of this, but this last chapter was tacked on at the end by the community because John has passed away by this point. And so you get this idea that there's a distinction between the evangelist and the source of the material, or a distinction between the source or witness to the material, who is thought to be John, and the process of writing it, where either John wrote, either someone else wrote the closing chapter 21, or perhaps someone else actually wrote the other material based on the testimony and based upon other written material from John. And so we have a distinction between John the apostle, the source of the gospel material, whether that's oral source or it's also in writing, and John the evangelist, who perhaps finalized the gospel and added this final chapter, who was representing this community that's speaking with reference to we believe that his testimony is true. So that's a theory. We don't know. But in any case, the tradition of the church is the source for the Gospel of John, whether that means the guy that actually penned the whole gospel, all 21 chapters, or penned 20 chapters and 21 came later, whether he also wrote or he just was the oral source of it. The source of the Gospel of John is, in the earliest tradition, John the Apostle, who's also called the beloved disciple. And the rest is theorizing with more or less weight of argument that can be produced and evidence from interpretations in the early church. So I not having heard what the teacher actually said, and I understand, although your son may be doing his best to represent it accurately, he may not have caught all the nuances. It doesn't sound like the teacher's necessarily wrong. It is at least a widely held theory, but is by no means certain. And in any case, the authority, the apostolic authority behind the fourth gospel, the Gospel of John, is John the Apostle.
What do you think, Greg?
Thank you. The reason he actually asked the question was because he went to his youth group last night at church and watched the first episode of The Chosen, the second season of The Chosen, and where they if you haven't seen it, it's an account of John, the Gospel of John, like John's writing it, and so he came home and he said, "Well, I didn't like that episode because it was inaccurate. My teacher said, John didn't write this." So,
well, if I'm remembering correctly, I may be misremembering, but I think that it's not John that's taking notes there, it's Matthew. And the idea is that Matthew is taking notes for what will eventually become his gospel. But I may be misremembering that. But in any case, even if it is John in The Chosen, two things need to be kept in mind. One, The Chosen is based on history in the Gospels, but it's fictionalized, so you're going to have things in there that didn't happen exactly as they're represented in the Bible. So that's point one. Point two, we don't know whether John took notes. I mean, it is, most biblical scholars, New Testament scholars, will talk about oral traditions, and they'll have a whole account of how the events and teaching of Jesus came to be written into our Gospels. And much of that has a good, solid, scholarly basis. Some of it is speculation, maybe well-founded speculation, but it's speculation. So we have to be careful when we say, well, that didn't happen, or that couldn't have happened. It couldn't have been that that any of the disciples took notes. That would have never happened. This is widely disputed, strongly disputed among New Testament scholars today, the extent to which note-taking was something that was allowed by disciples of rabbinic-type teachers in first century Judaism. And in any case, we're talking about Jesus, who is not necessarily to be regarded as following exactly the pattern of other Jewish teachers in the first century. So while we don't have any reason to think that the gospel writers were sitting down and writing their gospels as eyewitnesses, there are good reasons by when you compare Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the so-called synoptic gospels, for thinking that didn't happen that way. That doesn't mean there were not written sources or that the oral sources did not come to be written down early on, and therefore we can just dismiss things like you see depicted in The Chosen as just contrary to what we know to have happened.
Greg, thanks very much for the call. It's important, though, that the young people do get an education at a Catholic school in which they come to a sense of trust for the gospel. So whatever else happens, I would like to send you, we have a video. It's Jimmy Akin made it, and it's called Why You Can Trust the Gospels. So if you hang on the line, I have to take this break. We'll send you a copy of Why You Can Trust the Gospels.
And I'd also
let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
Hi, I'm Kristalina Everett, and I am so blessed to have a great new show on EWTN Radio. It's called Women Made New, where women help women get closer to God. Through honest conversations with our guests about the challenges we face in our lives, we're reminded that no matter what mistakes we've made, it's never too late to start over when we receive healing from the God who makes all things new. That's Women Made New every Saturday at 12 noon Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Mark Brumley, president of Ignatius Press, is our guest, and anybody can call 888-318-7884. We got our signals crossed, and there was another recommendation you wanted to make to Greg before we went.
Well, I highly recommend the Jimmy Akin resource that you referred to, but I also recommend the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, either the whole New Testament or the volume on the Gospel of John, because there's a great introduction there that talks about questions of authorship and so on, and dating. And while there are lots of things we don't know, there are a lot of other things that we do know, and we can be confident of. And when it comes to the apostolic origins of the Gospels, whether they're written by apostles or in the case of Mark and Luke, written by apostolic men closely associated with the apostles, that they go to the very sources of the teaching about Jesus. People, witnesses who heard Jesus teach, saw what Jesus did, and that's really what we need to convey. And we were talking during the break how it can be a challenge for a high school teacher, as you said, referring to the late Cardinal Dulles, make sure you catechize before you try to get into theology. That people have to be grounded in their faith, understand their faith before they go deeply into, just trying to understand on a very high-end level. And sometimes it's hard for high school teachers because they want to be, they do want to catechize the kids and build up their faith, but they get questions. And those questions sometimes are of a nature that they're really kind of theological questions. And then even when you state the answer correctly, and I know this has happened to me on Catholic Answers, and it happened to me years ago when we were doing seminars, and I know it happens to other apologists. You can give a right answer, but people don't always hear it correctly.
Right.
So.
Right. That's exactly right. But you just got to be so careful with the young ones that we're not teaching a skepticism before they have heard the gospel, before they've heard the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, because it can come across, well, they tell you that John wrote the fourth gospel.
Yeah, they tell you that.
The truth is,
right. Yeah. All right, let's go to Aiden in Kentucky, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Thanks for downloading the app onto your phone, Aiden. I think, personally, best app in the Alpha Quadrant. I'm going to go out on a limb on that one. Aiden, go ahead with your question for Mark.
Hi. My question basically deals with like shopping on Sunday, or like going places like a bowling alley or laser tag or snow tubing, things of that nature, where you might have to pay somebody else to work. Because I read something in the Catechism that said something to the effect of like you shouldn't make people needlessly labor on Sunday. So I just was curious as to what you had to say on that.
Okay. We know there's a commandment, keep holy the Lord's Day, fourth commandment. And in the Old Testament, of course, that was the Sabbath day, and there were very, very strict requirements of what you could do and not do on the Sabbath. The New Testament is not, in the Christian order of things, we do not observe the Sabbath in that way, but we still have the Lord's Day, which is, for reasons which we won't go into here, observed by Christians on Sunday. One quickie on that is tied to the resurrection of the Lord, the fulfillment of the Old Testament order of things. Jesus rose from the dead on Sunday. So the Christian weekly holy day, that the observance of which fulfills the commandment, the fourth commandment, is Sunday. But here's what the Catechism says about it. It says it refers to it as a day of grace and rest from work. Article 2184, just as God, quote, rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done, unquote, human life has a rhythm of work and rest. The institution of the Lord's Day helps everyone enjoy adequate rest and leisure to cultivate their familial, cultural, social, and religious lives. So notice it talks about rest and leisure to cultivate familial, cultural, social, and religious life. So you can engage in familial, cultural, social, and religious activities. 2185. On Sunday and other holy days of obligation, the faithful are to refrain from engaging in work or activities that hinder the worship owed to God, the joy proper to the Lord's Day, the performance of works of mercy, and appropriate relaxation of mind and body. So we're to avoid activities that hinder us giving the worship due to God. And normally that means going to Holy Mass, among other things. The joy proper to the day, so you need to enjoy a day off. The performance of works of mercy, so if we're out trying to serve other people, responding to suffering. That's what mercy is, love's response to suffering. We need to be unhindered in that, and appropriate relaxation of mind and body. Family needs to continue, or important social service can legitimately excuse from the obligation of Sunday rest. So, I usually make breakfast for my wife on Sunday, right? Because she usually cooks for me during the week. Well, that's work. That's a family obligation I feel I have to my wife. And it also refers to social service. So there are social activities, important services that are provided, people need, and that legitimate excuses from the obligation of Sunday rest. The faithful should see to it that legitimate excuses do not lead to habits prejudicial to religion, family life, and health. And then it goes on to say, the charity of truth seeks holy leisure, the necessity of charity accepts just work. And that's a quote from St. Augustine. And then the article 2186 says, those Christians who have leisure should be mindful of their brethren who do have the same needs and the same rights, yet cannot rest from work because of poverty and misery. Sunday is traditionally consecrated by Christian piety, good works, and so on. So it's talking about we need to be mindful of the fact that other people have to work on this day because they're poor, and we should try to relieve their suffering to the extent we can so that they don't have to work and they can freely do it. 2187 goes on to talk about the topic in more detail. So while it's true, we can do things like go to the store and things of that sort that involve the work of other people where we need to, we should try to minimize that, because we are creating an environment where other people have to work who would like to have a day off. And so that's part. And we can do other things, play sports, which are forms of relaxation of the body. We can engage in cultural activities, forms of renewal of the mind and body and mind and spirit from a cultural point of view. But at the heart of Sunday is Sunday worship of God. And for Christians, that means going to church. And for Catholics, it means attending Holy Mass.
Aidan, thanks for that question. Lots more folks on the line. Mark Brumley, president of Ignatius Press, is our guest. Right back with more calls for him right after this on this open forum on Catholic Answers Live.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com. Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Thank you, Sarah. A little bit of groovy music there, because it's Thursday and we like to play the groovy music on Thursdays. Mark Brumley, our guest. 1 million people on the phone lines ready to talk to Mark, so got to get right back to the phones. Mark Brumley, of course, president of Ignatius Press. He was mentioning right at the beginning of the program a brand new book, or well, not brand new book, but a new book from Ignatius Press by a whole bunch of younger apologists and theologians and converts to the Catholic faith in honor of the work, the life, the example of Peter Kreeft, formerly, maybe presently, from Boston College. I don't know. Just say the name of the book again, Mark. It
is Wisdom and Wonder.
Yep.
How Peter Kreeft shaped the next generation of Catholics.
Ignatius.com is where you can go to get it. Now I've forgotten what order I was in. Kathy, I'm going to go to you. You won the lottery, Kathy. Kathy in Kentucky, listening on Sacred Heart Radio. You're up next. Go ahead with your question for Mark.
Hi, Mark. I have a question about when your loved one dies and goes to, I don't know, purgatory or heaven, wherever they may go. If you ask them to do something for you, does God allow them to come back and do that for you? And the reason I'm asking is because my son died 2 years ago, and a few weeks after he died, I asked him to find the remains of a young lady who'd been missing for 9.5 years, who was the mother of this girl, was one of his really good friends' fiancé. And the case had been ongoing for 9.5 years, and constantly trying to get information about it. And then, like 2 weeks after I asked them to do that, they found her.
Wow.
Well, thanks be to God, good came out of that situation. What I would say is, in general, the Catholic Church does not encourage us to see those who've died and gone on to be with the Lord as people who are sort of, and I know you don't mean that this way, but kind of at our beck and call. We pray for them. We can ask their intercession, and if God wishes to utilize them in their intercession, that's up to Him. I know there's a theological discussion about the extent to which souls in purgatory can intercede for other people, but when someone dies, I don't know that person is in purgatory. For all I know, that person is in heaven. And so if I ask that person's intercession, then I'm just hoping that person is praying for me and for what I'm asking for with the Lord and in the Lord. So now, whether God will utilize that person in some way beyond responding to his prayers, I don't think we know. We do know that sometimes people who have gone on to the next life in the Bible are brought into play, as it were. We have the example of Moses and Elijah within the ministry of Jesus. They conversed with Jesus, and of course Peter, James, and John were there on the Mount of Transfiguration and saw them and so on. So it's certainly not outside of the realm of possibility or something inherently contradictory to the way God works. But the Bible wants us to not get too involved with the dead in that way. And that's part of the idea about in the Old Testament about not invoking the dead or trying to call up the dead, because we can come to a place where we think that there's sort of an independent access to those in the afterlife that we have. And in fact, we don't. What access we have to them comes through Christ and the relationship with Christ and in the communion of saints. So whatever tasks that God may have for those who've gone on to be with the Lord, those are tasks that happen in Christ, and it's not like we have this kind of independent activity that we can engage in. Does that help?
Kathy?
What you're saying is that if I just said, please, help find her, then he could have gone to God and said, hey, how about it? And maybe God said, okay, hey, yeah, it's time. Right. The weird thing about that was about a week after I actually did, it was out of despair because her mother was just so distraught still 9.5 years later. And I was feeling so grateful that at least they found my son, He wasn't out there lost for 9.5 years. But the girl herself appeared to a guy who does a podcast in a dream and told him all about how she was killed. And then he contacted her mother. That happened like a week after I asked this. And then like a week later, a hunter found her remains. In between.
I'm sorry, Kathy. I was going to ask Mark just to kind of sum up because we have a lot of folks on the line, but what do you make of all that, Mark?
I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. Mysterious things happen. Maybe we should bring in Jimmy. This sounds like something from Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
It does. This does. That's so funny. Of all the apologists we have, there's one person where people go, "That sounds like a Jimmy Akin question." Like you don't really get that sounds like a Trent Horn question, but Jimmy Akin, there is. Kathy, I'm sorry to cut you off.
I certainly wouldn't say that it couldn't happen. That didn't happen, couldn't happen, or anything like that. So
yeah, but I don't know is a fair response. I wanted to get to Francesca before we had to go to a break in Studio City, California, listening on EWTN. Hi, Francesca. Are you there with us?
Hi.
Hi. How old are you, Francesca?
I'm 9.
Francesca, did your brother call recently?
Yeah, my brother calls sometimes.
Yeah, all right. I thought so. Because we don't get all that many calls from Studio City. So it's very nice to hear you. Francesca, go ahead with your question for Mr. Brumley.
So, one of my friends gave my other friend a mean note, and it said to one of my friends that she was annoying, and it said to my other friend that they were a show-off, and we were one. And I just want to know what you think we should do.
Very good question, Francesca. And I'm going to say, you got some choices. One choice might be simply to ignore the note or the notes and pray for the friends who wrote the mean things. The other might be, to talk to the person and say, that note was kind of mean, but you're still our friend, and we're going to pray for you. We're praying for you. Something like that. Do you feel like you have a good enough friendship with these folks to talk that way to them?
Well, I'm new to the school, so
okay.
I don't know that I would be very useful for it.
Okay. Well, that's fine. Then you can just pray for your friends, and if your friend asks advice, you can say, we should, try to forgive this person. We don't want to become mean like that and do mean things. And one way to avoid that is, not to say anything, but if your friend thinks that something needs to be said, then you could support your friend by saying, you might tell this person that said wrote this mean note to you that that was a mean note, but that you forgive the person.
Okay, Francesca?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your call.
Thank you, Francesca.
You're welcome.
All right, and say hi to your brother for us.
Okay.
Okay, bye, Francesca. We have to take a quick break. Right back with more Open Forum with Mark Brumley, solving the world's problems, bringing peace to the young ones. Right after this.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
One of the reasons we should go to Mass is because it is the food of the saints that we receive. And for the saints, they understood rightly that the time after Holy Communion, that those moments are the most precious moments of our lives.
The Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, live from the EWTN Chapel, every morning, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and Television.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Mark Brumley, our guest. Lots and lots of folks on the line, so we will keep moving. I hope that was helpful to Francesca. Manny in Midland, Texas, listening on the radio. Glad to have you, Manny. Go ahead with your question for Mark.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. And speaking of wisdom and wonder, I have a question about King Solomon.
He was wise.
I did a Google search. Yeah, well, I don't think he was that wise. If he had that many wives and concubines, that's a lot of trouble, if you ask me. So
that's one way to think about it.
Yeah. Well, and Google also said that he only had like 3 kids. Is that pretty reliable? And if that's true, did he make his wives or concubines have abortions or something?
I don't know about that. I remember Rehoboam. That's the only one I remember.
Rehoboam, yeah. I mean, I know Solomon is famous for having 700 wives or something like that, and I'm sure that he had more than 3 children. Rehoboam was his son who inherited the kingdom, and then because, Father Fester was giving a homily the other day, and he's talking about how Solomon started out pretty wise, but then, kind of departed from that as he got older. He had this great prayer of God asking for wisdom, and he got it, but then
squandered it.
He squandered it, and you see the effects of that squandering on his son Rehoboam, who Solomon himself was rather harsh as a king, and then his son becomes even harsher as a king and winds up causing a civil war. So we have a split between Judah and Israel being the northern kingdom and Judah being the southern kingdom. And, Solomon has some responsibility for that. And I have to think that having 700 wives didn't help him be a good father.
No, that would make it a little difficult to be a good father, I would think.
Yeah.
That's pretty far from the design of fatherhood.
Well, and also having so many wives, they wound up having a deleterious influence on him. It wasn't just a matter of, are you crazy? You have 700 wives. They got him. They corrupted him in a lot of ways, spiritually corrupted him, and that again had its effect on the united monarchy, and then later when it divided, it had an effect there too. So it was not a good thing.
So is that what you were looking for, Manny, whether he was a good dad or not?
Pretty much. I mean, and what happened? Is it hard? Having that many wives, I can't believe he only had that few children. I just kind of was wondering, in real life, you're going to have more. You're going to have more than just 3 kids if you have that many. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, I think there may be 3 that are identified by name. I don't recall. It's been a long time since I read up on Solomon, but it may be that there were only 3 sons identified or something of that sort. I'd have to go back and check that, but it certainly is not. It's highly unlikely they had only 3 children with 700 wives.
Thanks, Manny. I'm going to go to Colleen now in Quincy, Illinois, listening on the EWTN app. Colleen, glad to have you here with us. Go ahead, please, with your question for Mark Brumley.
Hello. Actually, a comment first. A caller at the end of the show yesterday, Martha, who called in saying she had difficulty believing in the full presence of Jesus in the Eucharist at times. Mm-hmm. And I just thought of something comforting that she could easily find in her missalette. The second to last page usually is the Down in Adoration Falling in the beginning of Adoration, right, where one of the lines says, "Faith will tell us God is present when our human senses fail."
Yeah.
And I really, take a lot of that from that. And also in the back page, Thanksgiving after Holy Communion, the prayer of St. Thomas Aquinas is real helpful.
Yes,
so I just thought if you wanted to expand on that, is it a feeling that we believe, or is it our faith that we believe in the real presence of Jesus?
It's our conviction as Catholics that Christ is really, truly, substantially present, body, blood, soul, and divinity. In other words, the whole Christ is present under the appearances of bread and wine, the things that we can see and smell and taste. Those aspects of bread and wine are we call the appearances of bread and wine. Our conviction that Christ is truly and really present is a matter of faith. It's not something you can demonstrate. There are Eucharistic miracles, but even those miracles require faith to believe. So that they are sort of amplifications for our to deepen our faith, special signs to deepen our faith in the real presence, but they don't prove the real presence. You can't demonstrate that, because if you could demonstrate it, wouldn't be faith. So it's a conviction that has to do with trusting that what God has said is true and what God has promised will come to pass. Now, some people, where does apologetics come into that? Well, one role of apologetics is to show that we have good reasons for thinking that God has actually said this. So when we look at the scripture and the early tradition of the church, we can see that God has revealed that the bread and wine, the Eucharist, become the body and blood of Christ, and so on. That's one thing. And the other role that apologetics plays is answering objections. People say, well, how could bread and wine become body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ? Because, Jesus is, if you believe that he's risen from the dead, then he's a transformed, glorified, resurrected body, but how could bread and wine be that? And so then we start talking about the way in which the church understands the presence of Christ. It's a substantial present under the appearances or under the forms of bread and wine. But we're not saying if you break open a host, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, not saying if you break open a host, you're going to see bones, or if you put the precious blood of Christ under a microscope, you're going to see blood cells or things of that sort. That's not the nature of that's not what we claim when we claim that Christ is present and how he's present. He's present sacramentally under the forms of signs, the signs, what you can see and what you can hear and taste and touch. Those are signs that point to Christ giving himself as spiritual food, as sacrifice to us, and he is really, that is to say, independent of our thinking about it. Whether we think about him being there or not, he's there. We may not benefit from him if we don't think about him being there, but he's there whether we think about him or not. That's what it means to say the presence is real. It's not a presence that's imaginary. When we say it's substantial, that means it's not just the presence of his spirit, but his whole self is there. So apologetics comes in, helps us believe in the real presence by clearing away misconceptions or responding to objections. But when all is said and done, it's a disposition of faith to believe that Christ is doing what he said he would do, and that the church is understanding Christ properly when the church says, this is what Jesus meant, this is what Jesus has commanded us to do, and this is why we do it.
Colleen, thanks. I'm going to keep moving because the lines continue full. Let's go to Arthur in Lubbock, Texas, listening on Our Lady of Victory radio. Arthur, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Mark.
Hey, Mark, especially when you were dealing with that question about John, I was wondering, as publisher, the imprinter, what's your obligation to keep out things that are these speculations and in non-academic works and the bias and the different hermeneutics that come into play? What obligation do you have, and how do you pursue making sure everything you publish is 100% in line with the faith?
Good question. We do, obviously, Father Fessio has a doctorate in theology, and I have, a master's degree in theology. We have other people who are theologically literate, and so we're reviewing manuscripts. We have, colleagues and experts and all those folks that we can consult with and do consult with when it comes to theological works and things of that sort. So we have some training, and that's helpful and important when you're going to be dealing with theological books. You have to look at what a book is used for. Is the book going to be used for, is it intended to be used for seminary training or things of that sort, in which case official official ecclesiastical approval comes into play. And when we're doing Bible translation, Bible notes, for example, one of the reasons why we don't have the whole Ignatius Catholic Study Bible published yet is because while all the notes and all annotations and all that are now all written, they have to be reviewed by diocesan censors who make sure that there's nothing in those things that are contrary. There's nothing in those things contrary to the faith of the church. So it depends on what it's going to be used for and what the nature of the writing is. Then more broadly, when you're dealing with theological works, which are works of some sophistication, you have a different range of opinions that you can allow, and that we're willing to publish, because the thinking is that those are going to be books that people who have some measure of theological competence are going to be reading. They're not, going to be used in high school with little kids or in grade school with little kids. We have catechetical materials that are used for those purposes, and they have to be reviewed not just by diocesan people, but by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops to get a conformity with the Catechism approval statement, to show that what we're teaching is in conformity with the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So that's stuff for kids. Then things that are for a more popular audience, you don't have as much leeway as you have when you're dealing with sophisticated theological stuff, but you're not having to scrutinize it quite as carefully as you are when you're dealing with little kids. You're aimed at popular adult readers, and so you presume that they have basically a rudimentary knowledge of the faith, or if they don't have that they can get it and they can recognize that maybe they need some additional help to understand correctly what they're reading. But you try to avoid popular books, things that are of a more speculative, debatable nature, because people may not have the wherewithal to deal with those things properly. So that's what you try to do, recognizing that it's going to vary. There are some people that are not theologically literate, but are more disposed to find out things for themselves and therefore can handle higher level material, even in a popular book. And other people, they're not up to it. They're not ready for it. It's like when I teach theology classes, and I teach, adult ed classes, and I teach graduate level theology and diaconal formation theology. I teach that at different levels. So if I'm forming someone for ministry, that's something that's different from when I'm doing an adult ed class in a parish. And when I'm doing graduate theology that isn't necessarily aimed at formation for ministry, that's something further still. So you got to kind of make judgments about your audience and try to do your best not to confuse.
Arthur, thanks. Again, lots of folks on the line, so I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to go to Chris in New York, listening on the Catholic Answers app. And Chris, you're going to have to be quick with the question if you'd like an answer.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I'm wondering what specifically constitutes grave matter, and how would one know whether a matter is grave? Like, for instance, if someone tells a white lie, but they're still knowingly, with full consent, breaking the commandment, telling a lie with full knowledge, or if, for instance, if someone, like for adultery in the heart, how would one know when they've ventured past the threshold of venial into mortal sin, or how to judge whether something is grave?
Mark?
Generally, a violation of one of the commandments in the explicit language of the commandment constitutes grave matter. Whether or not one is culpable for a mortal sin, of course, depends upon knowledge and consent. So, for example, if I violate the first commandment and I have another god, that is clearly grave matter. If I have sexual relations with someone other than my wife, that's clearly grave matter. If I I murder somebody, that's clearly grave matter. Now, we go down another level when you try to get at the underlying moral principle behind the commandment as articulated. And that's where things like the example you gave of committing adultery with someone in your heart, basically the sin of lust comes into play, and you have to say, well, this is a serious matter. It pertains to one of the commandments. Do I realize it's wrong? Am I freely choosing to do it? So it can be more difficult in those cases because how am I engaged in this act of lust or committing adultery in my heart? As I glance at something, am I going on the internet looking for porn or that kind of thing? So there's some in that area. When we get in that area, there's some room for ambiguity, and you have to ask. That's why you need to do these things and review these matters with a confessor.
Chris, thanks very much. Other callers, I'm so sorry we didn't get to you. Maybe we can talk with you tomorrow. Mark Brumley has been our guest, president of Ignatius Press. Find out what they do at ignatius.com. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Cy. God bless you.
You too. Thanks. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic.